pleased to see you here at Kubby TV. And today we will be speaking to our special guest, Steph Sherer, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Access. And Steph is no stranger to controversy. Perhaps that's the price that one pays for being effective. But we're going to put it all on the line. We're going to ask the tough questions, and we're going to give Steph an opportunity to respond. Steph, what is it that people go out of their way to attack you, to criticize you, to make you the bad guy?
I would say that there are critics and then that there are haters, right? And I think that I know that I'm not always right. I do everything I can to really make sure that I'm not speaking for myself, that I'm speaking for my members. It is not an easy thing as a person living with dystonia to spend 20 days a month on the road, driving from city to city, having town hall meetings just to listen, and that's where I get my words, right? Is from listening to the people, and so I think that I don't know who people think I am, and why they think that I'm protecting some major monopoly. I mean, I've heard all sorts of interesting things. I enjoy critics, right? Like I have learned more about what works by having debate than hatred, right? So I would invite people, if you really want to know who I am, I'm a patient that probably could find marijuana from the illicit market for the rest of my life and be okay, and could have continued to have the successful career I had, right? I am, but I was moved by people that were willing to provide this medicine. I was moved by the people who need this medicine, and the fact that so many people don't have the privilege to be able to speak up for themselves, right? I'm not rich, or I don't come from a rich family, but I also don't live in Section 8 housing. And me being on the news talking about medical cannabis, I'm not worried about losing my apartment, right? I'm not worried about having my kids stolen, and I'm very moved by those stories, and I feel an obligation to help get those stories out. And so I wish that more of the haters would move into the category of critics and just give me a call and talk to me about the policies. But what's unfortunate is that, and I don't think it's not unique to this movement. You know, every movement has haters. Every movement has villains, and you know it's hurtful. It's hurtful to see when you don't have a life outside of your work, and you've really put everything of yourself into a movement, to hear hatred without someone just calling you and asking you why you're doing something. I'm very available. I mean, I go to public. I'm not walking around with security. My cell phone's everywhere, and so I don't know why people choose to hate. I don't think it's helpful. And you know, if you disagree with me about a policy, yes, please tell everyone. But tell them why that policy doesn't work, and don't make up lies about me or the organization to prove your point, right? If you really don't believe in the policy issue that I believe in, then you should be able to make your arguments on the merit of those policies without making up a whole life that I don't have. So.
Now, we saw especially harsh criticisms over AB 604, the California bill introduced into the legislature at the last moment. A lot of people felt that it was an act of desperation, that it was a knee-jerk reaction to the federal government, and that we were putting ourselves in a position where we were now going to be enforcing federal law on the hope that the feds would be nice to us and stop raiding our dispensaries and harassing our people. Well, where does ASA stand on this?
California has been sort of the target of a lot of controversy nationwide when it comes to medical cannabis. And what I see in California is one of the greatest experiments in democracy I've ever seen, right? Where you had a situation when in 2001, when I became a medical cannabis patient, there were only 11 dispensaries in the state of California, and most of them were in the Bay Area. And they were all operating illegally at the state level, at the local level, and the federal level. And when I realized, when one of them was raided by the federal government, I realized a lot of things about about the structure. Not only were they in harm's way from the federal government, but they were also in harm's way of the state and local and cities, right? We're kind of freaking out about what is that house on the corner there with where you see people walking out with pot. And there was actually a pushback that was actually starting to happen in Berkeley and Oakland and San Francisco. And one of the things that I helped with other activists was to bring those dispensaries together and figure out how we could talk to the city about what was going on, right? Because under state law, it was illegal to sell marijuana. And so what we realized is that this wasn't an unregulated system, that actually all 11 dispensaries had regulations. Not just anybody could walk in, right? You had to have a recommendation from your doctor. That's a regulation. Across the board, they were all doing that. They had a limit about how much people could buy. So no one could buy more than 2 ounces at once. And they were all doing that. I was like, well, that's a self-imposed regulation, right? And there were a few other items like that, looking for mold or mildew, right? Like that they were all doing. And so we wrote those down, and we went to the city with patients and the providers, and said, look, this law was passed in 1996 to allow patients to have medical cannabis. For those who can't grow or don't have a dealer, we need a place to find medical cannabis. And we have found a community-based solution for that. And this is what it looks like. It looks like this dispensary. And so why don't you just adopt these rules? That we're good, right? The community loves us. Here's a bunch of letters from our neighbors. Here's the patients we're serving. We promise we won't affect parking issues in the community, right? We just want to be a part of the community. And that's where the first medical cannabis distribution laws came from. That's where they came from. And if we hadn't passed those laws, those dispensaries would have been shut down by local police. And so then we went to the legislature and passed SB 420, which also is a controversial bill. But what we realized when we started talking to the legislature is that we had a lot of people that really wanted to shut down this whole access program down. And the laws that we had passed in the Bay Area and then in West Hollywood and a few other places by then were really at jeopardy if a state law came in that took away that right. And so that's where the language came in and why California is regulated city to county, right? Was because there were already cities and counties regulating. And so then there was this great experiment. There are 533 cities and counties in California. And that's a big project. And that's a lot of what we've been doing in California. But at this point in time, our brothers and sisters in Eastern California, San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County, San Diego, Fresno, Stockton don't have access. Their cities have banned. Their cities have worked with the federal government to shut them down, and we have members in those counties that really need to have access in their communities. And in the same way that this country needed the federal government to step in with civil rights and make it mandatory for states to not discriminate against individuals in this country, and under that same vein, I strongly believe that the state of California has to come in and say you cannot treat people who need this medicine as second-class citizens. You have to find a way that they can get this medicine, right? And after this great experiment, that's not happening, right? Like, those people do not have access. And so while people in Northern California, or maybe people in more progressive areas, have a great system and a great program, The people down south don't, and it's one state. And so, while I don't love all of the legislative proposals that have come out, I know that there is going to have to be something statewide if we're going to make sure that our brothers and sisters down south are going to have access. And that's why I fight with that legislature. Now, passing laws is like making sausage. Most people don't like to see how it's made, and it's really hard work, right? And well, I think it's very interesting that people use the word lobbyist as a dirty word, right? Because lobby really means that an individual goes and talks to their elected official, right? And I spend most of my time in California going around the state holding seminars of training people how to talk to their elected officials, right? And I'm not telling them what to say to their elected officials. I'm just telling them how to do it, how to make that phone call, how to set up that meeting. And our organization hosted 2 lobby days this year in Sacramento, where we help people get up to Sacramento. We train them on how to talk to their elected officials. Excuse me. We set up those meetings, and they were able to talk to their elected officials about whatever they wanted.
Hey, Steph, thank you so much for today's interview. And we'll be looking forward to you joining us tomorrow for another interview. In the meantime, this is Steve Kubby with Kubby TV, pottv.com, cannabisculture.com, and other premium websites on the internet. Wishing you a great 215 day.
So heavy where I stand. The indecision builds within my twisted